Ready, it's Casey's on the case. I am here with our first Mid-Olympics episode where we're going to go through the Canadian drone scandal, because obviously we have to talk about that, the first matches for all of the group rounds, and we're also going to talk about what to expect for the groups coming up, and then we're going to finish it off with how I would rank all 12 of the teams as we go forward, based on what we saw in this last match. So I told you I'd have a co-host. I don't have one today because I'm still traveling, and I had hoped to tape this yesterday, and it just didn't. I could not keep the scheduling block I had for a variety of reasons. So it's just me again, and it might be awkward again, but we're going to deal with it. So first things first, let's get into the Canadian drone situation. If you have not heard, and I don't know how you haven't heard, I think this is at this point gotten past soccer mainstream, but the Canadian women's soccer team, it has a drone scandal. Basically, one member of their staff was caught flying a drone over New Zealand's training earlier this week. Then it turned out when they looked at the footage that he had in fact taped prior trainings. He admitted to all of it. He admitted he had taken it back and used it for tactical knowledge. He pled guilty. So it was actually found to be a criminal offense in France and received a suspended sentence of 8 months. Since then, he was sent home. That coach's name is Joey Lombardi, along with his immediate supervisor, Jasmine Mander, and Bev Priestman removed herself from this first game between Canada and New Zealand. Can you tell I'm tired? Canada and New Zealand. And that was what the Olympic Committee thought at the time was going to be sufficient. They did not feel like there needed to be a forfeit or any other type of punishment as a result of the conduct. So since that all happened, Canada has played their first match against New Zealand, and further reporting has come to light that shows it was not an isolated incident of like one rogue employee who really decided to take one for the team and go get footage of the worst team in this tournament. It looks very much like it was something else. We have Canadian soccer staff, former or current, anonymously reporting to TSN that they had been asked to get drone footage. That was part of Canada soccer's culture, that they got drone footage of Japan, concerningly, at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics when Canada won gold of their closed training session, that a staffer who was supposed to go to New Zealand and Australia for the Women's World Cup in 2023 with Canada Soccer ended up not going after the staffer told Canada Soccer they would not take clandestine drone footage. So this appears to be far-reaching. Apparently, there were also attempts on the men's side to get drone footage at Copa recently, and Jesse Marsh said that he did not endorse the practice and shot it down. But this is something that's apparently been going on for quite a while at Canada Soccer. This is going to be a far-reaching investigation. FIFA already was doing their own review. We have not seen the outcome of that. But once the more information came to light, but Priestman has been removed for the remainder of the tournament. I don't think she's getting her job back. This is a mess. It is a massive mess. The other question that gets asked a lot here is, I think it's very clear anybody in coaching knew. Did players know? I don't personally think they did, and they keep reiterating that players didn't know. Is it possible some senior members of the programs who have since moved on might have known something? I think so, just because you get to be friendlier with staff as you become kind of a veteran, and maybe you learn some of that. But on the day-to-day, players really are not going to be reviewing every single last piece of footage. Like, it is a coach's job to go review footage and then figure out what to train you on and what you need to know. So it's not like players sit there and watch hours on hours of tape. That's just not an efficient thing to do, and it's not how teams work. So I think it's very possible that these players were just getting information and did not know there was drone footage. I also think, like, if I were going to do this, I would be looking at the drone footage for whatever I felt like was a cheat, and then I would be going back and looking at game footage that looked very similar to what I was seeing on the drone footage and then showing players that. So there's a lot of workarounds here. I think it's pretty dumb. It's such a large risk with like relatively little benefit unless you happen to see training for penalties or training of some like trick play. There's just not a lot that I think is that unpredictable about how a team is going to come out or what they're going to do. If you've watched them enough, if you watched that coach's teams enough, if you watch their players enough, like you kind of figure out what the permutations are. And ultimately people have to execute. So it was extremely dumb. The players are going to pay the price. Now, I will not be surprised if this results in reallocation of the medals from the 2021 Olympics. And for folks saying that's unfair, tough shit. It's a team sport. You know, the team is not just the players. The team is your coaching staff. That whole end of things is also part of the team and is part of all of those achievements. And if they cheat, the whole team cheats, regardless of who knew about it. So I feel bad for the players who, again, I at this point feel like don't know or didn't know. But I don't see a way that this can possibly be fair. I think they should have forfeited against New Zealand. Frankly, I think they should have to withdraw and go home at this point. But it doesn't seem to be where we're at. So let's, with that, get into it. Group A, Canada versus New Zealand. New Zealand actually got the first goal here. It was off of a corner kick, and it was a really nice, quick shot. That was roughly the extent of New Zealand's threats here. It was not actually close. Canada knocked like crazy. Their first goal I thought was beautiful, showcased their off the ball movement, their one-touch passing, the things that I think they've really developed more recently in their program. And you know, they got the second goal that was eventually coming because I think New Zealand defended pretty fiercely, but this was always Canada's show. New Zealand is still probably the weakest team in the tournament. I don't actually have them as the weakest anymore on my 12, which I'll tell you about at the end of all of this. But Canada, you didn't need to cheat. Why are you doing this? Like, guys, I'm tired of talking about it. Like, I want to not be dealing with this scandal, but here we are. So that was Canada and New Zealand. I think it's very difficult to talk about the match meaningfully knowing the rest of the background. The other game in this group, though, we could talk about for hours long. It was actually my game of the day yesterday that I did have to go back and rewatch because it was at the same time as the U.S., and that is France-Colombia. I highly recommend going back and rewatching this if you did not get a chance to watch it as diligently as you would have liked. So France, of course, goes up 3-0, and if you were watching USA-Zambia instead of focusing on France-Colombia, I can understand why. You probably just thought France was running away with it. People on Twitter said France was running away with it. If you watched it, it was actually quite a bit closer than I think people were appreciating by the scoreline. Katoto looks good. Her being back for France is very important. Colombia also looks very good. Does not look any different than Colombia you saw last World Cup or even at the Gold Cup, other than that they had Mayra Ramirez until she got her red card. So extremely strong defensive team. They play very well together. They've got good 1v1 defenders. They also have some really exciting attackers. I think the biggest problem for Colombia was those attackers were not linking up particularly well. They all had their own individual moments, but they were kind of getting isolated and not getting chances to work together. So you saw Mayra Ramirez get chances, you saw Linda Caicedo get chances, you saw Marissa Venegas get chances, but you did not see them working in concert that much. And I think had you seen that, you'd see a stronger Colombia. Part of that is because France also defends really well. Like, this French team is great. I have said before, they are the strongest starting 11 in this tournament. Nothing about that has changed for me. They're very fun to watch. They are dynamic. They play quickly. They play well as a team. Like, they move and collapse in the right spots. They're hard physical players. It's just very, very fun to watch them. I am going to be a little bit heartbroken if this generation of players comes away without winning a meaningful title. Wendy Renard, everybody knows I'm a massive fan of her as a player. She is probably the best center back in the women's game of all time. And if you want to just watch an absolute Wendy Renard masterclass, at like the 68th minute of this game, she loses the ball to Mayra Ramirez and she's 1v1 and like Ramirez is faster than her. Like she should be away. But Wendy is so good with where she is placing herself and how she is slowing Ramirez down so that she doesn't have to go make like a dog so foul, which we'll talk about, of course, with USA Zambia. She doesn't have to do any of that because she knows how to just stick in a little bit at the right moments. It is gorgeous. If you're a fan of 1v1 defending, I like highly recommend going and watching that little bit. So, you know, what happened here with France going up 3 and then Colombia coming back, getting 2 goals. Again, I think it was much tighter than the scoreline really indicated. Is kind of thing one. You know, Colombia gets a penalty, they're back in. And then another goal happens, and then they're really in. And then you had a Mayra Ramirez red card, which was unfortunate, but probably deserved. Probably correct. She comes in, studs up very dangerously and could have really injured somebody. So harsh because I think that it wasn't, she was kind of in regular running movements, but that's a no-no. So that's the recklessness that can result in that type of card. Luckily for Colombia, they play New Zealand next. So I think they'll be okay without her. Sorry, New Zealand, because but I think you all acknowledge that this is the case. So I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know. The other thing I have to talk about with France Colombia is when I watched this back this morning, I watched it on Peacock with the English language broadcasters. When I was watching a little bit yesterday, I was watching in Spanish. And I don't know who these two men are. But they do not know women's football at all. They got some kind of a cheat sheet and they're talking out their ass the whole game. And I know what that looks like because I'm a lawyer and I've had to do that before, where somebody gives you quick notes and then you need to go and sound authoritative on some topic. I've done it. I can spot it a mile away. They're not that good at it. The first telltale sign was when the starting lineup and they were discussing it, they were like, shocking omissions of Amandine Henry and Le Sommer. And I was like, have you all watched the French national team in the last 3 years? I mean, 3 years is probably not fair because it's really, we got to talk about the Hervé Renard kind of era. But have you watched the French national team at all? Because I think it was more of a question of whether those two players would be included on this roster, not whether they start. That's not even up for debate. There are so many stronger options right now. So shock omission, no. Maybe to you if you have not watched this team in several years, but it's not shocking to anybody who has kept up with this team the way you are, I would hope, supposed to if it's your job. So I understand it can be really hard to keep up with all the types of little news and notes that are kind of required for doing color, especially when you come into a sport like that fast, but that's what your research team should be doing. I found it very disappointing and frankly disrespectful of the level of athlete and game that we're seeing. So anybody at NBC, if you're listening, you gotta do better than that. People should be familiar with what's going on and should be able to talk about these players intelligently. So I found that very disappointing. So the next matches, as we talked about, you've got Colombia playing New Zealand. That match is going to take place. I got notes. Look at that. I got notes. All right, so Colombia, New Zealand, that one is taking place at 8 a.m. on Sunday, July 28th, if you're on the West Coast, at 11 a.m. If you are on the East Coast. Again, I don't think Colombia is going to have any trouble. Then France and Canada are going to play at noon West Coast, 3 p.m. East Coast. I would like to ask Peacock, why did you put the France games at the same time as the U.S. games this many times? I want to watch France, but, I don't know how to talk about France-Canada again because the Canadian drone scandal is just something. On an on-paper matchup, I still think France should take this. I don't know how these players on Canada can possibly be in a good state of mind to play these matches. I don't. The whole world is focused on you and calling you a cheater. It's not just that you're feuding with your federation. You are being accused of the biggest cheating scandal I know of in women's soccer. So even though they've got a lot of experience with playing through adversity and playing when there's a lot of other noise other than their own match, this is a different task. So I think this could get pretty ugly, honestly. I do. Katoto hat trick. And also, going back real quick to Colombia, France, I don't think they got Diani involved enough. I want to see a little more of her. So let's give it a Katoto hat trick and a Diani brace, because why not? All right, I think that's enough on Group A, so let's go to Group B. So Group B is, of course, the U.S.'s group. It's the U.S.'s group. So let's talk about USA Zambia. I've talked a lot about this on live already. You can go back and watch the live in full if you want on YouTube for post-match, for halftime, for pre-match, whatever. So you got options there. There's also been some TikToks with my quick thoughts. Let's kind of expand on this. So this was a starting lineup which was expected, with Rose Lavelle and Lindsay Horan in the midfield. I actually thought they worked pretty well together this time. Is that because they are finding chemistry? Maybe. I think it's also because Zambia was kind of attempting a low block, but they weren't attempting it well. Low blocks are challenging. I think we don't always appreciate that because we see them from weaker teams. So you think oh, how hard could it be if this is what Costa Rica trots out? And they're difficult to execute though. They require your team to be extremely disciplined in the way they're moving. And if you've got a team where like the defensive line starts kind of doing their own thing too much, you're gonna create gaps very easily. So I don't think they were doing it as well as we've seen it before. I also think we were running off the ball better, particularly Mallory Swanson made a lot of really good runs diagonally behind, as did Sophia Smith, even in those smaller spaces that pulled Zambian defenders out of position pretty quick. I saw people panicking early about how this was going to be Costa Rica 2.0. And I was literally sitting there like, are we watching the same game? Like, patience. They're not, this idea, it's like they have to be finishing every chance and you're going to be punished against other teams if you're not finishing them. Okay, well, no shit, Sherlock. Like, they know that. But let's, like, take it down a notch. We're 5 minutes in. Like, we're 5 minutes in and we're getting chances. So everybody cool it, because that kind of mentality is not healthy for the players. It's not healthy for you as a fan. It just makes you, like, anxious all the time. But if you start seeing, that the defenders are already getting pulled out of position badly, less than 10 minutes in, they're not holding that together for 90 minutes. There's just no way. So it was not the same. And we saw that pretty quickly. Trinity Rodman, gorgeous turn and goal. Mal Swanson with 2 goals in 70 seconds. And, the first half looked good. We were flying really high. Sophia Smith did have to come off at the end of the first half with an injury. I don't think it's that serious. Somebody said that she was seen in the huddle after the match, so she wasn't in medical. I do think it was just a scenario where you were up 3-0. At this point, the red card had happened for Zambia, so they're playing down a player. We got to conserve energy. So Zambia red card was a dog so denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity. It was revised to a red card after review on VAR. So again, we talked about this a little bit on live, but if the player is already by you and is in on goal just against the goalkeeper and you then foul them, you're gonna get a red card. So it was really going back and looking, and it's like, did the foul happen when we were kind of in more of a 50-50 going for the ball, or was she already by? I think was what the revision was, and she was already by. It's a rough red card. I don't think Zambia needed that. You're already down 3-0 and then you get a red. It's pretty brutal. But that game ended at that red card. So the second half was not super fun to watch. Rose Lavelle came off. Corbin Albert came in. I thought Corbin Albert had one of the worst games we've seen from her. The touches were not there. It didn't look good, and it hasn't looked good, frankly, since Gold Cup. Whether that's, that she's having a hard time in this environment now after, the homophobic and transphobic posts that she made, and dealing with the aftermath of that, I don't know. But either way, at some point, we have to have a conversation about whether her level of play is there. And right now, I don't think it is. So I would have liked to see Croy Bethune get minutes. Croy Bethune, if you missed it, was on the roster yesterday because Jaden Shaw has a leg injury. Croy Bethune swapped in. She is now medal eligible, even though she did not get any minutes in the game. So you just have to be on the bench for one of the games. You will get a medal if the team medals. So congratulations to Croy Bethune for that. But I would have liked to see her play. We saw more subs. I saw Lindsay Horan got a rest, which is great. I thought she had one of her stronger games for U.S. Women's National Team. Then, also came off Trinity Rodman, who doesn't always get a lot of rest either, and Mel Swanson came off. Jenna Neiswanger came in, Casey Kruger came in, Emily Sonnet came in. We were clearly doing a more defensive thing here. And just really trying to do more energy and possession management. I know folks are mad that this wasn't a blowout. It didn't feel like Thailand 2.0. That's okay. This is a different tournament. You have a lot of different demands on people. So I'm frankly really surprised because the same people I saw last week after Costa Rica talking about how we need to respect Zambia and, they're real challengers and they could beat us, we're going to get grouped, are the same people who now, after a 3-0 win, which was not close at any point, they're now saying, well, they're the 48th ranked team in the world and we should have beat them more. Like, pick a struggle here. Like, pick a thing. I do not have patience for this kind of like negativity. We need to find, and I'm not saying you need to be Delulu positive, but I need y'all to like take the trauma from the last World Cup and put it over here. Like, we need to just be realistic about what these things look like. And I don't know. I'm losing a little bit of patience here for that side of the fan base, frankly. I understand it, but it's giving over-involved, undereducated soccer parent. It is. So if you relate it all to that commentary and find yourself in that mindset, I'm just going to ask you to like take a deep breath, take a step back. Like it's going to be okay or it's not. Because let's talk about Germany, who looked very good against Australia. And I think Australia looked pretty bad. It was the worst I've seen Australia look ever. Not ever, but in this era. They looked tired. They looked a few steps behind. They looked like they might have been on the same red-eye flight I was on before. And other than a 10-minute spurt at the beginning of the second half, it was very challenging to have anything positive to say. Germany, on the other hand, looked lively. They looked crisp. They looked all the things I didn't think they were necessarily going to look at this tournament based on what we've seen them do recently. It was the best I've seen Germany look since the 2022 Euros, where obviously they went to the final. So is Germany back? Is Australia bad? I do not know. We're going to find out Sunday when Germany plays the US. But Julia Brand is a problem. She is such a dynamic attacking midfielder. She has this tactical awareness of knowing exactly where to push that you see in very few other players. Like the one that really came to mind to me that's another mid that does that very well is Kosovo Aslanli from Sweden, of course. And Julia Brand is that, but also faster and taller. So, frightening player. And I'm a little worried about how we're going to contain her. Do we go with a double pivot to mitigate some of her opportunities there? I think I wouldn't hate it. But I don't think we start there. I think we might end up there if she's giving us trouble. So we will see, but I would not be surprised if this ends up being an Emily Sonnet game with Sam Coffey in there. But MM will probably have different strategies. I'd also probably start Neiswanger against Germany. So, and then I hope we're working on set pieces because their set pieces looked pretty good. So yeah, Germany, US play at noon West Coast, 3 p.m. East Coast on Sunday. That will be probably our toughest match of the group at this point. You know, like I said, Germany looked good. They have not looked good previously. So again, I'm not really sure which German team we're getting, if we're getting the one that shows up against Iceland. And there were moments against Australia where they had the same defensive struggles in the back, and the US is going to punish them for that. So they had some trouble building out of the back. They seem pretty committed to doing it. Australia almost got them a couple of times there. I think the US will get them. So, you know, which German team shows up Sunday? I don't know. Which US team shows up Sunday? I don't know either. But those two teams play Sunday. And then Australia will play Zambia. That is the 10 a.m. West Coast, 1 p.m. East Coast match. Australia look bad. I don't know if they look bad enough to lose to Zambia, who again is now without their starting center back on top of all of it. So we'll see. But neither team looks good. I think you can skip that one. It's not going to be a fun watch. And all of that brings us to Group C, your group of death. Let's start with Japan, Spain. Japan went up 1-0 first off of a gorgeous free kick. But this was pretty much Spain's show. It was not as close. Well, not as close. It was not as dominant by Japan as when these two teams played in the World Cup. I don't think this Japanese team is nearly as strong as they were last World Cup. They've had quite a bit of rotation. They have a lot more younger players coming in. It did not look as good. Spain, I thought, looked beatable. There were still weak moments there. Spain looked incredibly uncomfortable, out of position. And for reasons, sorry, not out of position, out of possession rather. And for reasons I don't understand, you know, instead of continuing to possess and do their thing, once they were up 2-1, they kind of at points sat back and let Japan take the game. And I actually think it's when Japan looked best and Spain looked worse. So, you know, and on the one hand, you're like, well, we don't need to work for it as much. They haven't gotten it. We can keep disrupting them. But on the other hand, like if you are a possession-based team and you succeed in possessing, like you should be doing that even if you're only up 1 goal. So didn't quite understand that. Didn't think that looked great. Both teams looked beatable. Spain is still the favorite, obviously. But Japan, I'm nervous for them getting out of the group because the other match was Brazil-Nigeria. And if you listened or watched any of my previews, you know that this Brazilian midfield of Duda Sampaio and Yaya, I was nervous for them because they're young central midfielders who play together in the Brazilian league for Corinthians, and they have not really been on the national stage together. So this was either going to be magic, or it was going to be a pretty rough go, and it did go more toward magic. I thought they looked fantastic. Marta playing some of the best footy we have seen her play. She's just playing great. Seems like, anyway, I'm surprised because you would think it's like, why is she still here? But no, she's playing great. So she looks like she could keep going to 2027. Do I think Nigeria looked as good as last World Cup? No. But I think that also could have been Brazil looking quite strong. So I don't know what to tell you for the next match of things. Like Nigeria or Japan could be the weaker teams here. I'm not sure. I don't think any teams in this group are weak, just to be clear. Like no team here is weak. But Brazil, it was clicking. So, and I think their matchup against Spain is going to be very fun to watch. Group C's next matches are Brazil taking on Japan, and that is happening at 8 a.m. West Coast Sunday, 11 a.m. East Coast. And then Spain will be playing Nigeria, and that is at 10 a.m. West Coast, 1 p.m. East Coast. So you can check those out as well. I think I'm probably most curious about Brazil-Japan, because those are the two teams where I was like, this could go either way. They've got a lot of new folks on it. Spain-Nigeria, like, I know Randy has probably had that match circled on his calendar, and I'm sure he's got something special for us. Like, if he has a tactical, like, specific situation for this group, it is for that match. Brazil, it would have been hard to game plan for just because you didn't know who they were going to start, and there's not a lot of tape on them. It would have been harder to, like, unless you had a drone. Sorry, Canada. But anyway, Spain-Nigeria will be the one that well, actually, no, it's both. Why am I saying like I don't want to watch? Anyway, you're going to watch all of them. It's going to be great. So with all of that, going through both the quick match previews and our thoughts, I am going to tell you my ranking of all of the teams in the tournament based on what I saw. So, and I'm going to be really hard on some teams. This is probably going to change. I'm trying to combine it with how I felt previously, but we're going to start from the bottom. Right now on 12, I've got Australia. I've got Australia in the last place, and I have to hope that was a one-off. But all I can think of is that sketch from I Think You Should Leave with the hot dog in the meeting, where he's like, no, I'm not eating. I'm just the tiredest I've ever been in my whole life. And that's how I feel about Australia. That was like the tiredest I've seen these players. I hope it was something that could be remedied. I hope this wasn't like long-term fatigue. It's been a concern for Australia. A lot of their players have played a lot of minutes. They've done a lot of travel. Probably the freshest looking of that lineup was Cooney Cross, who has not played as many minutes for Arsenal. So I'm hoping it can be rectified. But if they come out like that against Zambia, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So that's my current 12th. My 11th is Zambia. I think I was not impressed. Barbara Banda had a few moments, and you saw some good defending from Naomi Gurma, so she can get it on you, and I think she will get it on Australia. But the back line's a mess, man, and it's been a mess, and it's not getting better. So that whole match could end up like 3-3, 4-3, would not surprise me. Up next in 10th, I've got New Zealand. See, so you're not like, I don't know. Zambia and Australia really didn't impress me. New Zealand was in it. So I don't think New Zealand is getting points off of Colombia or off of France, unfortunately. But I don't think they looked worse than Zambia or Australia. Then my 9th place team right now, and this part starts to get really fluid. My 9th place team here is Nigeria. I think there's a big drop off between New Zealand, Zambia, Australia, and then going into Nigeria. I think this kind of portion here is easily rearrangeable, but I'm going to go with Nigeria here. Again, not sure how much of what wasn't working, because they did not get the offense really going that much against Brazil. I'm not sure how much of what wasn't working was Brazil doing well, or was them struggling. And I'm not sure we're going to get an answer to that, just given who else is in their group, until these teams eventually get out of the group. The team I've got in 8th is Japan. I wasn't impressed. Other than the goal in the beginning and the beginning play, and then when Spain just again backed off for no reason, I wasn't that impressed. I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of people who are like, they're gonna come back and they're gonna be great again, and they're well coached. They can execute tactics well. They obviously played the favorites in the tournament and they went up a goal on them. So I could be getting this completely wrong. I just didn't think it looked that good. And then the next one I've got here, in 7th, I have Canada. Again, I don't really know what to do with Canada given the circumstances. I just don't. I think they should be disqualified. I'm sorry. I do. And I don't expect that this is going to get better from a playing standpoint. Just morale, this is a tough ask. Then in 6th place right now, I have Colombia. I thought Colombia, again, actually looked pretty good against France. I expect are going to rise in my rankings here. Then in 5th right now, I have Brazil. Again, I thought Brazil looked good. New midfield for them, and we'll see just how strong they really are as they have to play the other teams in that group. Again, it could be maybe Nigeria is weaker than I am perceiving, but we're going to find out. Then in 4th right now, I have Germany. I think this really did come down more to Australia being very, very tired than Germany being good. But if the German team can play like that against the US, then they can win a medal. So I am increasing them here. Then in 3rd, currently I have the US. I was happy with that. I was happy with the result against Zambia. I have no issue with load management, energetic management. Like, you were up 3. It really was not close. So again, I know people wanted something different, but I really have no issue with how that looked. Then in 2nd right now, I have Spain. They are, of course, still the favorites, but in terms of who looks the best, I thought Spain looked very beatable. Yeah, and I think they're going to drop a game in this group. But my number 1 team is France, who I, again, think they have the strongest starting lineup. I thought they looked really strong against Colombia. The 2 goals, some rough individual defending on France's part. One of the few moments where I can say there was rough 1v1 defending for France. And then, but otherwise, it's, I thought that they did a really good job capitalizing on their opportunities. I thought they created threats and chances from very different parts of the field. They're just a well-rounded, good team, and I think they look great. What did you think of our first day of matches? You can let me know in the comments here. You can let me know on TikTok. You can join me live for every U.S. Women's National Team match this tournament, 30 minutes before kickoff, at halftime, and post-match. I stick around for about 30 minutes, and we all hang out and chat. You can join me on YouTube. You can join me on TikTok for that. You can also find this as a podcast on Spotify and Apple. And if there's anywhere else you want to have the podcast, just let me know and I'll work on it. I'm not particularly sophisticated at this yet though. So we will see where it ends up. And hopefully next time I will have a co-host with me so you get a little more interaction and I stop feeling like I'm just awkwardly talking to a camera. Anyway, all right. Good seeing y'all. I'm going to go take a nap.